There was once a man who was summoned to another world and saved it. Of course, he became too popular there and turned into an isekai normie. However, that man fell into a trap and was forcibly returned to his original world. Moreover, he had to start over as a baby. This is the story of the way too fantastic ex-hero who lived as a gloomy high schooler, as he gets summoned once again to that same other world in a very unexpected development. A young boy, Setsu, is sitting in a classroom, looking out his window, and a young girl, Yuhi, talks to him, although she calls him Yuki-kun. Setsu looks out the window and wonders how the other world is doing. Suddenly, darkness falls on them as a white magic rune appears on the floor. The students are all confused, but Setsu seems to know what is happening as he smiles. Suddenly, the white light explodes, and they find themselves in a desert in another world. As they wonder what happened to them, giant red-eyed soldiers race towards them. One of the students says they're in trouble and tells them to run. Everyone but Setsu scampers in fear. The soldiers run towards them, trying to attack. As one of the soldiers tries to hit him, Yuhi throws herself on Setsu to protect him, but Setsu uses magic and, with a single touch, blows him away with a grin on his face. Setsu grabs Yuhi's hands, and they run to join the others under a tree. Suddenly, human soldiers show up and start fighting the giant demon soldiers with magic. Setsu is surprised and thinks the war should be over already, but suddenly, he feels the power of a curse on one of the demon soldiers. A girl, Elka, arrives on a horse and tells them to leave the battleground. A young man, Blaine, also joins her as they go off to fight the demons. Yuhi watches them in amazement as they fight gallantly. She remarks that they're strong. Setsu informs the students that they have to leave. They arrived at the kingdom of Destinia, and the king welcomed them as he thanked them for coming at such a crucial time. He told them that Destinia was being invaded by demons just like the war 5 years ago, and they were heroes from a foreign world sent to help Destinia. The students looked at him confused and didn't understand a word he said. The queen addresses them, saying she understands that they may be confused. She told them about a hero who came from a foreign world 5 years ago and stopped the war that raged across their world. Eclair. She bows and pleads with them to lend a hand in fighting the war. The students wonder how they're supposed to fight a war when they know nothing about fighting, but they agree to stay, afraid that they'll be attacked if they leave the castle. The queen thanks them and asks them to go and rest as they disperse, murmuring between themselves. Setsu assures a worried Yuhi that he will not let anything happen to her. The next day, Glein starts teaching them swordsmanship, while Elka teaches them magic. The students don't get the hang of magic, but Yuhi catches on quickly. Setsu watches from the side and notices Yuhi's talent for magic. He walks around the castle and runs into Elka, who reprimands him for slacking off during training. Setsu acts arrogantly toward her, making her angry. Elka tells him that his calm composure and arrogance remind her of someone from 5 years ago. She tells him to return to training, or she'll send him back using force. He dares her to try, and Elka decides to teach him a lesson. She draws her sword, charging toward him, but he dodges and slaps her firmly on the bottom. Elka's leg shakes as she realizes that the only person who can do this to her is Setsu, the hero from 5 years ago who went missing. Her attitude immediately changes, and she runs to him, prostrating gleefully on the floor, rambling about how much she missed him. Setsu asks her to get up, but Elka is completely smitten and offers herself as a chair for him to sit on and calls him master. Blaine walks in on them and stares at the sight in shock. Elka tells him that Setsu is back. Blaine doesn't believe it because he looks different, but he accepts it as soon as he realizes that Elka can only make a fool of herself for one person, Setsu. Elka and Glein run to tell Thea, a magic researcher, the news about Setsu's return. But she already knows because she felt his magic. She tells Setsu that even with his new face, his power still feels the same. Setsu declares that he is back as promised, and they happily welcome him back home. Setsu becomes worried as he remembers the war. They sense his worries and tell him they need to go somewhere and talk about what happened. At the top of the castle wall, Elka asks Setsu how he was able to return. Glein asks why he looks like a different person, and Thea says that after the battle, he vanished without a trace. Setsu tells them that he doesn't know what happened, as he remembers the last fight he had with the one who caused the war, Toma. During the fight, he hits Toma's sword, resulting in a massive explosion. That was the last thing he remembered. He tells them he was reborn in a different world, but his memories and powers remained, and then suddenly he got pulled back into Eclair. They tell him that it can't be a coincidence that he was pulled back in again. Setsu asks them what happened to Toma and suggests that he may be behind this new war. He said he felt Toma's curse on one of the demons that attacked them. Elka and Glein told him they looked for Toma after the war, but just like Setsu, he also vanished. Thea states that if Setsu has returned, there is a possibility that Toma has returned. A guard interrupts them and tells Glane that the king requests his presence, so he leaves. Elka jokingly tells Setsu that Glane's job should have been his if he hadn't disappeared, but he tells her he would never have accepted it because he planned to travel the world after the last war. They relax and enjoy the scenery beyond the castle, as Setsu's mind wanders to Toma, back in the throne room. The king discusses going to war with his cabinet, and he says that they should never have listened to the hero and signed a peace treaty with the demons. Glane objects and tells them they need to wait for the emissary that was sent to the demonic continent before making any rash decisions. The queen mentions that the demons invaded them first, unprovoked, and she says the arrival of the new foreign heroes is a sign that they need to fight. The rest of the cabinet agrees with her as they clap happily. Back at the practice grounds, Yuhi's magic training is going well as she practices alone. Setsu commends her on her improved abilities, but she is worried that the practice is for them to learn how to hurt people, and doesn't understand why they need to go to war. She cheers up and promises to use her magic to protect Setsu, as he tells her not to overthink the war. That night, Glane, Elka, and Thea met with Setsu. Glane tells him he bought a little more time with the king by saying the new heroes need more time to practice, but he will not be able to hold them out for long, as the war is unavoidable. Setsu tells them he'll be going out to stop the war by himself once again. They offer to follow him, but to their surprise, he turns them down. He says that given the imminent war, they can't all leave Destinia. He tells them that if Toma is behind this war, then they need to stay back and help in case a fight breaks out. Elka objects, but he shuts her down as she continues to mumble in disappointment. Setsu says he needs to get something he needs, so the next morning, he sneaks into the palace with the trio to steal Setsu's sword that he left behind 5 years ago. Thea makes them invisible with magic as they sneak around. Setsu asks why there were so many guards, and Glane tells him it is because of the imminent war. Elka tells Glane that she is going in and asks him to cover her as she runs off. Glane tries to stop her, but she dashes off and runs after her. Setsu and Thea stay back and reminisce. They continue to discuss, but are interrupted by a loud voice, so they hear Elka's voice and run towards her. They see she already beat up a guard. Glane says he thought the plan was to do this peacefully. They bundle the guard's body into a cupboard and hope no one finds him. Elka picks up the lock where the sword is kept, and they go in. Setsu picks up a giant sword and calls it Kuromaru. Just then, 2 guards outside notice the stashed body and call for help as they order the castle gate to be locked. Thea hears them and says they must have noticed someone sneaking. Glane tells them to leave while he buys them time. Thea offers to stay and help, but asks Elka to leave with Setsu, or she'll get in the way. Setsu drags Elka out. He feels Thea is right, and Elka causes too much trouble. Back outside the gates, Setsu prepares to leave, and Elka says they will try their best to buy more time until he returns. Just then, Yuhi ran in and jumped on him, asking where he was going. Setsu confesses that this is his second time back in this world, and he needs to stop the war, so he is going to meet an old acquaintance for help. Yuhi begs him in tears to take her along. She promises to be useful to him, but Setsu turns her down and tells her it is too dangerous, so he must do it alone, but she objects. Setsu puts his foot on the ground firmly and tells her he is doing this to protect her, and she calms down and hugs him. Yuhi tells Setsu to close his eyes for a moment, and he does. She uses her magic and swiftly gives him a haircut. Setsu is astounded and comments her. Yuhi promises him that she will keep practicing and become stronger so that she can protect him. Setsu flicks her head with his finger, and she jumps in surprise. He says if she can dodge the next time they meet, then she will pass the test. He waves and bids them farewell as they watch him walk away. The scene opens at a jewelry store. An old man is shouting at a young man in the shop as a little girl. Ruri watches them from behind a curtain. The old man refuses to sell a particular piece of jewelry to the young man. He explains that all his pieces of jewelry are precious, so he refuses to sell them to a young person who doesn't know their value. The young man calls him an annoying old man and tells him he is willing to pay any amount for the brooch. The old man proudly says that no amount of money will make him sell it. Little Ruri looks worried as she grabs her grandfather and asks him if the young man is here to cause trouble, and he tells her yes. The young man dumps a small bag on the table and asks if it will pay for the brooch. The old man continues to rant, not wanting to sell, but he looks down in shock to see a small bag of gold coins and sells the jewelry immediately. When the customer leaves, Ruri asks her grandfather why he later sold the jewelry, since he said pride matters more to a craftsman than money. He pats her on the head and tells her that pride and attention to detail are important, but sometimes there are exceptions to this type of money, as he holds the gold coin up with a wide grin on his face. A few years later, at Ruri's grandfather's burial, she holds his picture in tears. After the burial, young Ruri packs her things and leaves home as she makes a promise to deliver the package her grandfather gave her. It was his last job before he died. That night, Ruri drove through the forest in her carriage alone in fear. Suddenly, the horse neighs and stops abruptly. She tries to get it to move, but it ignores her. Just then, a monster with red eyes charges at Ruri as she screams in fear. The monster hits the carriage and sends Ruri tumbling to the ground. Her bag opens and a package falls out, revealing the precious jewelry her grandfather had sold to the young many years ago. Ruri picks it up in relief and puts it back into her backpack, forgetting all about the monster. She turns around and comes face to face with the monster. She stammers and starts rambling in fear, telling the monster that she has a lot of money, so there is no need for it to eat her. It ignores her and charges toward her, but is suddenly killed by Setsu. Setsu asks if she is alright, but Ruri starts rambling again. She offers to pay him for his service and tells him to give her an invoice. He tells her that he is fine and doesn't need her money as long as she is safe. She tells him her grandfather taught her that nothing is free in life. Setsu offers his hand to her as he says her grandfather is crazy for teaching that. As Ruri grabs Setsu's hands, she thinks he looks eerily familiar to the young man who bought the brooch years ago, although she is not sure. Setsu asks why she was traveling alone. She tells him she had to leave in a hurry, so there was no time for her to hire anyone. Setsu bids her farewell and turns to leave, but she stops him, asking if he can be her guard, and he turns her down. Ruri begs him and says she needs to deliver something important. She asks him to at least accompany her halfway, and Setsu agrees to go with her until they reach the port town, since he is also passing through there. Setsu and Ruri leave the goods and carriage behind and travel with just the horse. Ruri looks back, disappointed about losing her goods. Setsu tells her to forget about it. She mumbles under her breath sadly as she grabs her backpack. Setsu notices the bag and asks her about it, and Ruri grabs her backpack tightly, refusing to show it to him. They continue to argue as they move on. The next morning, they reached Marsen port town. Setsu is surprised as he remembers the town being smaller. Ruri says the town grew and prospered after the war ended 5 years ago. She asked him if he had come to the town before, and he told her that he visited the town when it was still very small. Ruri told him she had hired a ship that would get her across the sea. It turns out Ruri was headed to the demonic continent. All the ships in the port refused to carry her across because of the war. She even kneels to beg, but they all turn her down. Setsu is surprised that a little girl like her was trying to get to the demonic continent alone. Just then, a group of knights from Distinia stops Ruri and demands to see her merchant pass. She gives it to them, but they start to taunt her. The men asked to see her backpack, but she refused to show it to them, so they tried to grab it forcefully, but Setsu intervenes. He asks them to show him their permit to search. They get angry and try to pull out their swords as Setsu dares them, and he puts his hand ready to draw his sword. The people of the town gather around them and start whispering and complaining, so the knights sheath their swords and walk off in anger after threatening Setsu. Setsu mumbles under his breath that it must be hard for Elka and Glein to keep these types of people in line. He jumps as Ruri screams his name excitedly and thanks him for helping her. Later that day, they sit down to eat, and Ruri praises him for handling the knights as she offers him more food. Setsu tells her he was impressed by how she stood her ground, and she thanks him shyly. She asked him how he knew they needed a permit to search personal belongings, and Setsu told her he had an old friend who knew about things like that and was a stickler for rules as his mind wandered to Glein. He asks her what she plans to do now that she can't find a ship. Ruri tells him worriedly that she will search the whole port town until she finds a ship, and if she doesn't find one, then she'll buy one herself. Setsu tells her that buying a ship is impossible and too costly, and Ruri says it doesn't matter. Setsu tells her he will help her get to the demonic continent, and she jumps for joy, offering to pay him. But he says not to worry since he is heading there anyway. He tells Ruri to eat and sleep at the inn because she looks so tired. She thanks him and offers to split the cost of the inn with him. Later that night, Setsu tells Ruri to go wash up, and she asks him if he can help her hold on to her package, as she agrees to show it to him. Ruri opens the box, and to his surprise, he recognizes the brooch because he bought it years ago. Ruri talks about her grandfather as the story goes back in time. Ruri's grandfather was a famous jeweler, and no one was as good as him in the whole of Distinia. One day, someone brought back a piece of jewelry her grandfather had made for it to be fixed. During that time, he fell sick, and it was his last job. On his deathbed, He entrusted her with it and made Ruri promise to return the jewelry safely to its owner. Back in the present, Ruri finishes her story with a smile, hands the box to Setsu as she goes to take her bath, and teases Setsu jokingly not to run away. Setsu opens the box and touches the jewelry, activating the magic on it. He realizes it is the same one he cast a protection spell on and gave someone as a gift. His mind wanders to the owner, as he hopes nothing bad has happened. That night, as they slept, the three knights from earlier barged into the inn, asking the owner for Ruri and Setsu. They told the owner that the duo were spies for the demonic continent. As they break down the door, Setsu grabs Ruri and jumps out the window as she screams in fear. The knights chase after them in pursuit and corner them, but Setsu jumps over their heads, with Ruri still in his arms. He sets a trap with bottles, and they slip on the bottles, crashing to the floor. Setsu and Ruri run into a dead end on top of a tower, and the knights catch up with them. Setsu makes jest of the knights, but Ruri begs him to stop provoking them. He grabs her hands and jumps over the tower as Ruri screams in fear. Suddenly, a giant sea dragon, Levia, rises from the sea and catches them as the knights watch with shock. Setsu greets his old friend Levia and asks if she can take them to the demonic continent, as Ruri is still mortified. Levia glides away with them on her back, leaving the knights on top of the tower still bewildered. They decide that it is a dream and agree that there is no need to report it to anyone. Later on, as they sail, Ruri is still shocked that they are riding Leviathan, the sea goddess, and she wonders in shock who she hired as a guard. As the sun rose, they saw the demonic continent. The next morning, Levia is seen fighting a giant squid. As Setsu cheers her on, she defeats it and kills the giant squid. Levia comes back on land as her human self, and Setsu introduces her to Ruri. Levia bickers with Setsu for not helping her kill the squid, and he tries to calm her down. She angrily asks him why he disappeared without a word, only to show up 5 years later, asking her to be his ride. Ruri points out that they can't leave the giant squid lying dead at the shore, so Levia asks Setsu to handle it. He slices a part of it and starts frying it to make squid rings, a crunchy snack. Ruri tastes the snack and finds it delicious. As she eats, Levia tells them that Evil Barrow, the demon lord's castle, is on the other side of the mountain, just close to a demonic fishing village called Volsi. Ruri is surprised, as it turns out that's where she is headed. Setsu says he also has business with the recipient of Ruri's package. Levia looks at Ruri, surprised, and then says she remembers that Dezas sent her brooch for repair. Ruri is surprised and asks her if she knows Desastal Sereno. Levia says yes, and tells her that the owner of the package is the demon lord, Desastal, who lives in Evil Barrow. As Ruri screams in fear, Levia prepares to leave, but Setsu asks her to come with him. Levia is still furious with him for not showing up for 5 years. As they continue to quarrel, 3 demon children interfere and tell Setsu to apologize. He closes their mouths with the squid ring to shut them up and tells them to leave, but they get too excited and start asking for more. Levia laughs and tells them there is plenty more where that came from, which makes Setsu grumble because it means more work for him. He grabs the giant squid and heads to Volsi as the children follow him with chants. At Volsi, the villagers are worried about running out of food as the humans have stopped coming to their town due to the war, and they can't fish due to the giant squid. Setsu interrupts them and asks if he can fry his squid in their town, and they scream in shock. That night, the villagers threw a party, happy that the monster was dead, and praised Levia for saving them, giving her their best food and wine. Setsu sliced the squid swiftly with his sword, shocking the villagers. He fried it while Ruri sold them, as Levia taunted him from the throne they gave her, making him angry. Later that night, a young demon, Vlad, the demon lord's personal guard, sees the village light up and runs towards it, thinking humans had set it on fire. Ruri is drunk as she and Levia talk about Setsu, and Levia reminisces about their past. She tells Ruri that 5 years ago, Setsu tried to cross her ocean without her permission, so she fought him, but Setsu defeated her and dragged her around to help him end the war. Ruri screams in surprise after she realizes that Setsu is the hero who stopped the war. Levia tells her he promised Setsu to maintain peace in the oceans, and Ruri realizes that is the reason accidents in the ocean are reduced. She says she is angry with him for disappearing, but is happy that he came back. She smiles and looks at him fondly, as Ruri notices the way she stares at him. Ruri then concludes that Levia loves him, but she denies it. She calls it ridiculous, but admits she was waiting for him to return. Suddenly, Vlad bursts in with his sword, ready to fight. Everyone looks at him surprised, and the children offer him squid rings. Later, in the middle of the night, Setsu finishes his sails and goes out to the docks to join Levia as she uses magic to fish. Vlad apologizes to Levia for barging in earlier, Setsu walks in and calls his name, and Vlad realizes who he is. Setsu asks him why the most trusted officer of the Demon Lord was not at the castle, and he tells him he was looking for Levia. Vlad bows and implores Levia and Setsu to save the Demon Lord. He narrates that the Demon Lord has been forced to marry a man named Terran Sneeder. He tells them that she agreed to be held by a curse in exchange for Terran helping her end the war. He tells them Terran brought a powerful cursed necklace. Vlad informs Setsu that humans invaded them and left the flag of Destinia behind. Dazos even sent an emissary to Destinia, but the emissary never returned. Terran Sneeder took advantage of Dazos' reluctance to go to war and offered to help her negotiate peace in exchange for her marrying him and wearing the cursed necklace. Levia and Setsu wonder how a man like Terran can stop the war, and Ruri tells them that he is the world's wealthiest merchant and most of the trading ships are owned by Terran Trading Company. Vlad informs them that they need merchant ships during the war, and since Terran has a grip on the wealth of the world, they believe he could stop the war until he comes up with the slave contract. Setsu angrily asks him why Dazos is willing to become a slave just to stop the war. Levia says it is because of her promise to Setsu. Levia and Setsu agree that they have to help Dazos. Vlad tells them that the wedding ceremony with Terran is coming up soon, so they have no time to waste. He warns them that Terran is surrounded by skilled guards, so they need to tread carefully. Vlad adds that the road to the castle is crawling with monsters, and Levia tells him she'll handle it. Vlad thanks Levia. Levia and Setsu discuss as they set off, leaving Ruri with Vlad. They start running towards the mountains as they continue to reminisce, and suddenly they are attacked by monsters. Levia turns one of her hands to her monster form and uses her magic to kill them in one blow. Levia asks Setsu what he plans to do when they get to the castle. Setsu says he plans to blow up the wedding along with Terran. She wonders how he plans to stop the war without a rich merchant. Setsu tells her that Terran may be behind the war. He points out that Destinia and the Demo Nation are both claiming the other nation attacked first, so he thinks someone orchestrated the attacks, judging from the cursed soldiers he saw the first day he arrived. He says the soldiers don't belong to Destinia or the demons. He adds that while the two nations are blaming each other, it is shady for some merchant to show up with a cursed necklace and call it peace. As they continue to talk, monsters attack, but Levia blasts them all at once without a trace using magic. Setsu commends her and asks if she got stronger. Levia proudly says that this is nothing compared to what she can do in the ocean. They continue to race each other, and Levia looks at Setsu proudly as she thinks about her past. The story goes back in time to before she met Setsu. 5 years ago, Levia had no interest in doing anything. She lay at the bottom of the ocean every day with no will, but after her encounter with Setsu, she realized there was more to the world. She started protecting the seas not because she promised him, but because of her free will. Back in the present, the duo continues to run, while Levia makes jokes about squid rings. They reach Evil Barrow, challenging each other to do their best. The story goes back 5 years as Dazos, the Demon Lord, narrates her story. She lived a long life, and during that time, fought numerous wars as an heir, a ruler, and a protector. Dazos fought in a never-ending war until she met Setsu. After their fight, Setsu offered her his hands and asked her to join him and end the war. He then offered her the brooch as a token of reconciliation, and she accepted it in tears. The scene opens up at Evil Barrow after Setsu disappears. Vlad tells Dazos that Setsu has gone missing, and no one knows where. Dazos is devastated, but she vows to keep her promise of peace that she made to Setsu. Several years later, as Dazos walks around her territory, she is happy to see everyone at peace as she waves to them. As she walks around and talks about the war and how they have achieved peace, the stone on her brooch breaks. Vlad offers to take it to a skilled jeweler in Destinia for repair, and she thanks him happily. One rainy night, a demon soldier barges into the castle and reports that the Destinian army has invaded them. Vlad complains, and Dazos tells him not to jump to conclusions. She instructs them to gather her top officials and sends 2 of her guards, Zeon and Lamina, as emissaries to find out what is going on. She then vows again to keep her promise to Setsu no matter what. 1 month later, Dazos watches her army from a window as they prepare for war. The soldiers are worried they might not make it to the front lines. One of the soldiers says they should never have trusted humans. The other soldier reassures him that everything will be fine and that the Demon Lord will take care of it. She has not heard from the emissaries she sent and is worried that her nation will not last long if this continues. Vlad brings her the news that Terran Sneeder of Terran Trading Company wants to see her. Terran proposes marriage to her. In exchange, he is willing to use his power to help her end the war with Destinia. After reading the contract, Dazos concludes that he was asking her to be his slave and flings the contract away. Terran opens a box to show her the necklace she'll be wearing after they marry. To everyone's shock, it is a cursed necklace that would enslave Dezas. Dezas asks Terran to give her time to think. As Terran leaves, he taunts her, saying she doesn't have a lot of time, and laughs as he walks away. When she is left alone, Dezas starts to think about Setsu, as she wonders if this is the price she has to pay for peace. Vlad walks in and pleads with her not to accept the offer. He assures her that the army can fight the war. Dezas sadly tells him that she can't refuse the offer for the sake of her army. Vlad informs her that he won't give up, and he storms out. Dezas talks to herself in tears as she thinks about the wedding and what Setsu would think about her. While heading back, Terran is pleased with himself as he speaks with a hooded demon in his carriage. He says telling the demon Dezas was easier to convince than he expected. It turns out he was working for someone else, although all he wanted out of the deal was the beautiful demon lord. Terran tells the man that now that they have the demon kingdom, there's no need to push any further and start a war. He asks the demon if they can pull out the magic soldiers they made, and the demon says no. A confused Terran asks why, and the demon tells him it is his master's will to continue. On the day of the wedding, demons sit on one side of the castle and humans on the other. The demons are not happy about this wedding. Terran stands in front of the altar in a white suit with a smug look on his face. The door opens to reveal a beautiful Dezas dressed in a white dress, and everyone looks at her mesmerized as she walks down the aisle sadly. The priest begins the ceremony. When it is time to exchange their vows, Terran pulls out the necklace and gives a speech with the smuggest face. He promises to bring peace to the world and asks the demons to pledge allegiance to the new demon lord as he laughs wickedly. Dezas surrenders herself in tears as she raises her neck to Terran. Memories of Setsu fill her mind, and she wishes she could see him one last time. As he tries to put the necklace on her neck, the glass above them explodes, and everyone runs out, fearing an attack. Just then, Setsu jumps in and gives her his hand. From afar, Vlad and Ruri see the explosion. They conclude it must be Setsu and hurry off to meet him. Back in the castle, Terran shouts at his guards to protect him, and they fly to the sky, charging towards Setsu, but Levia kills them all at once. Dezas calls out to her happily, and Levia jokingly tells her she looks terrible in white. Terran scampers to hide as Levia turns to face him. Suddenly, the hooded demon shows up and attacks Levia with shadow magic, and she freezes. He then goes in to finish her, but Setsu blocks the attack and frees Levia. Setsu blows him from behind, and he falls to the ground close to a scared Terran. The demon says he wasn't expecting Setsu, but his master would be pleased to learn of his return. He gets smug and tries to attack Setsu, but he is no match for him. He stands up and tells Setsu he must return to his master, as he blows the wall beside him and escapes before Setsu can get him. An excited Dezas rushes to hug Setsu, telling him in tears that she missed him. He hugs her and says he is happy. She is safe. Levia draws their attention to the hooded guards she fought earlier. As soon as Setsu removes the hood, they vanish into thin air. Dezas says they are magic soldiers, made from curses. Setsu picks up the cursed necklace and tells them that it is definitely Toma's doing, and he crushes the necklace. Dezas says she suspected it too. She informs Setsu that she'll come with him and says Toma has to pay for making her wear this hideous gown. Setsu tells her he is going to visit Regulus, king of the beastmen, and he says she needs to stay back in case Toma pulls another trick. Dezas is sad that they have to part ways so soon, but Setsu reassures her, as they both agree they need to fulfill a promise. Levia is disappointed. They have to leave immediately, and says she was hoping to rest since they've been running around and fighting all night. Just then, Ruri runs into the castle, with Vlad behind her. Vlad screams at the mess in the castle. Ruri asks if everything worked out, and Setsu tells her that it did. She brings out the box and hands it to Setsu, telling him he has to be the one to give it to Dezas. Setsu faces Dezas as he opens the box to reveal the brooch, surprising her. He puts the brooch on her and says, "This is the second time." Dezas touches it emotionally as she says, "Yes, this is the second time." Rays of sunlight shine through the dent in the castle window as Ruri sighs in satisfaction. As the sunlight hits Deza, she closes her eyes and raises her head towards it as she thinks about Setsu, saying he has taught her once again what it means to feel alive. Later that day, the demon soldiers cleared out the castle and captured Terran. Dezas sadly bids farewell to Setsu and Levia. She wishes she could come with them, but Setsu promises to take her anywhere she wants after they solve this problem. Vlad tells him that just because there is peace doesn't mean a ruler can leave the country. Levia tells him jokingly that he can handle things and help Dezas out. Ruri also stays back on the demon continent. To thank her for bringing her brooch, Dezas told Ruri she could open a shop in her kingdom. Vlad thanks Setsu for his help. Levia and Setsu set out, and as they leave, Desas tells Setsu to make sure he comes back to her once everything is over. The scene opens up in the past with a young Setsu meeting Yuhi for the first time as their mother introduces them to each other. Little Yuhi offers to play with him, but he turns her down. Yuhi narrates that Setsu seemed like a scary, unfriendly boy the first time they met. They lived close to each other and played together a lot. As they grew, Setsu helped her with her schoolwork, and they spent a lot of time together. Yuhi wanted to go to the same high school as him, but she was not intelligent enough. One day, she sees a poster for a special training academy and asks Setsu if she needs to go there so that she can get into his school, but he tells her to aim for an easier school, which makes her sad. Yuhi doesn't listen and attends the academy. She studies and works hard, but she doesn't do well in her mock exams. That night, as she heads home gloomily, some boys stop her and start taunting her, but Setsu intervenes. After they leave, Setsu tells her she needs to stop going beyond her limit, and Yuhi sadly tells him that regardless of what anyone says, she just wants to go to the same school as him. Setsu tells her that he will help her study since that's what she wants, which makes Yuhi thrilled as she thanks him. Yuhi loved him so much that she wanted to be with him forever. Back in the present, the foreign heroes have gotten better at magic. Yuhi's magic was even stronger. She destroyed her target with powerful magic, impressing everyone. Elka commends them all and calls it a day. Yuhi runs after Glain and Elka. She asks them if they are friends with Setsu, and they tell her yes. Elka gets emotional and says she wishes to stay by Setsu's side forever. Yuhi says she wants to be with Setsu too, and asks if they can give her special training. Later that night, Elka takes her to the top of the walls and tells her about what Setsu did for them 5 years ago. She says he is somewhere out there trying to maintain peace once again. Yui tells her she intends to do whatever it takes to be with Setsu, but she needs to get powerful enough, so she challenges Elka to a fight. Yuhi fights Elka, but Elka is too strong for her. After the fight, Elka commends her. She says Yuhi is more special than the others who came from the foreign world. Elka asks her if she is willing to stand by Setsu's side. There is one thing she lacks. She leads Yuhi to a sewer underground infested by monsters. A giant crocodile monster comes out, and Elka tells her to fight it. The monster charged toward her, and she blasted it with magic. Yuhi jumps for joy as she thinks she won, but the monster comes back without a scratch. It grabs her wand, and as they struggle, the monster scratches her with its claws. She raises her hands and blasts the monster with a large explosion, and it falls wounded. Yuhi feels bad for it, but Elka tells her to finish it off. Yuhi hesitates, so Elka tells her that she is powerful enough, but this is her only problem. She says that they are at war, and you either kill the enemy or they will kill your friends. Elka tells her that if she wants to protect those important to her, she must kill. Yuhi remembered the first day they arrived and how the soldiers killed each other. As the monster starts to awaken, Elka finishes it off and walks away as Yuhi falls to her knees, realizing she has no determination to kill. The next morning, she hears a knock, and Thea comes in to help her heal her wound with magic, and Yuhi thanks her. Thea says Elka was crazy for throwing her into that situation, but Yuhi says she asked for it. Thea tells her she sees her as one of them, because none of them knows what Setsu is like in the other world. But he looks at Yuhi the same way he looks at them. She tells her that Elka was only hard on her because she wanted to treat her as an equal. Thea asks her why she wishes to be with Setsu so badly. She informs Thea that Setsu has been by her side and helped her so much, as she remembers all he did for her, so this time she intends to be the one to help him. Thea wishes her good luck as she leaves and runs into Elka standing outside, looking worried. Thea tells her not to worry, as Yuhi is strong. Elka is still worried that Yuhi might get hurt if she fights with them because she cannot kill. She also thinks that Setsu wouldn't want them to force her to kill. Thea says it's not anybody's right to decide whether Yuhi kills or not. All they have to do is respect whatever decision she makes. Glain finds Yuhi alone in a corner, sad. He feels she is still bummed out from the events of last night. He tells her that even for the sake of someone precious, it is normal to be hesitant about taking a life. She asks him how he gathered the determination to fight, and Glain informs her that he is like every other soldier, and he chose to make other people suffer because he would rather not watch those around him suffer. He says she has her own determination and tells her to find the answer by herself. He leaves as he informs her that Setsu probably wants her to come up with an answer that best suits her. Yuhi realizes that she wants to fight but also stay true to herself, and she smiles as she realizes she already knows what to do. The next morning, during practice, Yuhi performs incredible magic and blasts the target. Thea, Elka, and Glain look at her, surprised by her power. Later on, she takes Elka back to the monster-infested sewer for another practice. Elka asks her if she found her determination, and she says she made a decision. The monster comes out, and she looks at it, ready to fight. Elka tells her that forcing herself out of her comfort zone during battle might break her, but Yuhi moves forward, determined to show her. The monster charges for Yuhi, but she burns it with a giant ball of fire magic, and it falls to the ground. Elka commends her for thinking the monster had been killed, but Yuhi says she only temporarily incapacitated it. To Elka's surprise, Yuhi tells her that he decided never to take a life. She says she will never lose, but she will never take anyone's life either. Elka commends her but says she will need a tremendous amount of power to pull it off. Yuhi happily tells her that she'll practice and become stronger. The next day, Blaine addresses the foreign heroes. He says the king has issued a decree, and for them to protect their nation, they will join the Knights of Dystinia and leave for the demonic nation, Evil Theon, tomorrow at dawn. He asks them to prepare themselves physically and mentally. After dismissing them, the students gather to discuss as they worry about going to war. Yuhi looks out the window as she asks Setsu to wait for her and gallantly walks up to meet Thea, Elka, and Glaine. The next morning, a wagon is carrying Setsu and Levia to Beastman Continent. Levia relaxes on the floor of the wagon as she munches on snacks. Setsu tells her that this journey is tiring and reminds her how cool she was yesterday when she promised to follow him anywhere, no matter how far. She asks him what he would have her do, and he says she could get some kind of magic that could make them appear there. But Levia explains that transfer magic is too draining. Besides, she likes how they're traveling because she has been carrying them across the sea, and now she needs to rest. She continues to eat her snacks, crosses her legs, and even takes his share. Suddenly, their carriage stops, and a young female demon asks them if she can share their ride. Setsu stares at her, recognizing her as she climbs in with a younger demon who calls her big sister. Setsu calls her crybaby Alize, as she bursts into tears after realizing who he is. Setsu introduced her as Alize Ephriel, and said they traveled together the last time he was here. Alize says Setsu taught her combat every night physically, which raises alarms in Levia's head, and as Setsu tries to explain, the other young demon interrupts them. Levia asks who she is, and Alize introduces her as Amele, her little sister. Setsu is surprised and says he doesn't remember her having a sister. Amel says they are sisters just because they ended up living in the same house. Alize asks him where he has been for 5 years, but he hesitates as they all give him serious looks. He tells them everything. Alize says if anyone else had told the story he just did, she wouldn't have believed, and Levia agrees. Setsu asks Alize to come with them to the Beastman Continent and help him, just like she did 5 years ago. But Alize turns him down and says she has a problem she needs to handle first. Alize narrates that ever since Setsu vanished, she took up a job fighting monsters. One day, she accepted a small village's Zathro request to help slay a dragon. They gave her a house to stay in, and that is where she met Amel. That night, she and Amel talked as they ate dinner. Amel was so nice to her. She asked if she stayed alone, and Amel told her she lived with her brother before he disappeared. She says her brother adopted her 2 years ago after he found her. Furthermore, she says her brother hasn't come home since the day the dragon first appeared. Amel tells her that she is already used to being alone. Alize says she is tired of traveling, and after she captures the dragon, she would like to settle in Zathro. She asks if she can stay with her, and Amel agrees with pleasure. Alize tells Amel that she can call her sister. Janelle jumps into her arms in joy and agrees to call her sister. Back in the present, Setsu asks her if Amel's brother was killed by the dragon. Alize says no, and explains that every time the dragon appears in Zathro, several villagers go missing. She adds that normally, after a dragon attacks, it leaves evidence of a fight behind, but this one just vanishes without a trace and leaves nothing behind. Setsu and Levia think it may be related to magic. Alize says she thought killing the dragon should be the first thing, so she made a drastic decision. She disabled the tower built to ward against evil as she tried to lure the dragon back and prepare an attack to ambush it. That day, she sends Amel home, but they play with a butterfly and talk for a bit before Amel runs home, giggling. That night, the dragon shows up, and Alize attacks it. She injures it a bit, but it flies off into the woods, and as she chases it to finish it off, the dragon disappears. She returned to the village, but it was empty. The villagers had all vanished. She rushes and thankfully finds Amel crouching in a corner crying. So the next morning she decides to take her to someone in the city, while she goes back to find the missing people. She wants to find the missing villagers, but she has no clue where to start, so she asks Setsu if he has any ideas. Setsu and Levia say they've never heard anything like that, but they'll help her, and the two sisters are delighted. Levia and Setsu start brainstorming. but she comes up with the most ridiculous idea, like a zombie dragon, and starts rambling on about zombie attacks and air zombies before Setsu cuts her off. She then suggests a siren attack, but Setsu tells her this happened on land, not water. She says maybe a siren lived in the village, but Amel tells her that sea creatures have a distinct smell, and she has a good nose so she can smell them, but she never smelled any sea creature in Zatharo. She apologizes for saying sea creatures smell, and tells Levia that she doesn't smell. Setsu comes up with the idea of space aliens. As he rambles on about them, Levia hits him in the head. Setsu says, what if the dragon was like her, and took a human form to escape during the pursuit? He asks her if she can make people vanish, and Levia says she can't and won't, and tells Setsu to stop making her look bad. Alize is surprised, and asks Levia if she is a dragon, and Levia says no, as Setsu teases her, comparing her to a dragon. Levia says she is a sea god, which is much better than a mere dragon. She says if a dragon that makes people vanish exists, why didn't it make Alize disappear? Suddenly, their carriage stops, and the driver tells them they need to wait until the river calms down before they can continue. As the rain keeps pouring and the water rises, Setsu wonders why the dragon kept attacking the village. Levia suggests it may have been hungry or drawn by magic. She says the magic people use can attract monsters, meaning someone may be using powerful magic in the village, attracting the dragon. He wondered why the villagers disappeared, and he said people don't vanish into thin air. He proposes that someone in the village may be using transfer magic. Furthermore, he says, what if the attack happened after people vanished, not before? This means the dragon always shows up after the magic. Alize tells him that magic needs a user, but all the villagers have already disappeared. Setsu informs her that people started vanishing 2 years ago, and points out that there was someone who arrived in the village 2 years ago. They all turn to face Amel, as she denies the accusations. Alize agrees, and tells him that she is the victim. Setsu asks her to remember what she said about Levia, and her being able to smell sea monsters, but Alize informs him that most demons have a sharp sense of smell. Setsu says Levia never lets her magic leak out, even in her human form. Levia agrees. He says even Alize couldn't tell that Levia was a sea creature. Amel knows she has been caught as she sighs with a smile, and opens her eyes as they transform into a monster's eyes. She blasts the carriage as she transforms into her monster form, a dragon, and Setsu jumps out with Alize and Levia. The dragon starts to attack them with fire as they run off. Alize runs off and hides, feeling guilty that she called herself Setsu's pupil, but is now in hiding. Setsu calls out to her and tells her to stop hiding Alize, and Setsu fights the dragon as it charges towards them. As Setsu rises into the sky, he calls out to Levia, and she uses her magic to fortify his sword with water, making it invincible. The dragon breathes fire towards him, but Setsu sends the fire back into its throat. He calls out to Alize, and she jumps and pierces the dragon in the head with her sword, and it vanishes, leaving small white particles that look like snow falling. That night, as Levia ferries Setsu across the sea, she asks him if it is indeed okay to leave Alize on her own. Setsu said if Alize calls herself his pupil, then she needs to finish the job she started. Alize arrives back at Zatharo and goes to the house as she thinks about the time she spent with Amel. Suddenly, a voice startles her. Amel, accompanied by monsters and giant soldiers. Alize is surprised that she is alive, and she points her sword, ready for a fight. Alize asks her what she did with the villagers, and Amel says they turned into dolls. It turns out she has been using the missing villagers to create cursed soldiers for the war. She introduces herself as Melular, the monster master. The next morning in a town called Leoport in the Beastman continent, a young girl, Shironeko, walks down the market as traders greet her and leave her with gifts. She gathers a lot in her hands as they continue to give her more, but she turns the rest down, feeling overwhelmed. She leaves with her hands full as children stop her and ask her to teach them to fight, but she tells them they need to play as kids, not fight. She goes back home to her sister, Minako, who is sick and bedridden. She is about to go back outside to hand out the remaining food to the needy, when her sister coughs violently. She runs to get her drugs and gives them to her. Minako drinks the concoction, which momentarily stops her cough. She apologizes for being sick, but Shironeko hugs her tightly as they cry, promising to make her better. The dozens of medicine bottles in the corner show that she has been sick for a while. Shironeko. 3 days later, Setsu and Levia try to hire a boat, but a beastman at the port angrily says there are no more boats. Sets offers to pay him more, but he still refuses. He tells Levia she will have to get them across. Levia angrily tells him that she has been swimming for 3 days and nights to get them here, so she needs to rest. Setsu apologizes and says she is the only one he can rely on, patting her on the head sweetly. This makes her calm down. She tells him she needs to rest, but she will swim again tomorrow. The Beastman interrupts and says a boat will be available tomorrow, and Setsu is overjoyed, but Levia is angry and tells them to read the room. Setsu says they should eat and find a place to sleep. That same day, Shironeko arrives at an inn and hands something over to the innkeeper, Kuroinu, who gives her a bottle of her sister's medicine in exchange. Shironeko thanks her for helping her find the medicine. Kuroinu tells her it's fine and commends her for taking care of her sister. Kuroinu says she has another job for her, but it might be a little difficult. She hands her a wanted poster of Setsu and Levia. As Shironeko realizes, the next job is an assassination. Kuroinu tells her that, if she completes the job, she'll never need money again in her life, and will have no problem buying medicine for her sister. Just as Setsu and Levia walk into the inn talking, Shironeko pulls a hood over her head and slips out, while Kuroinu pretends like nothing happened and attends to them. That night, Shironeko tries to get her sister to eat, but she can't, as Minako tells her that her stomach can't hold down more food. Shironeko looks at the almost empty bottle of medicine and sighs sadly. Her sister notices and asks why, but Shironeko cheerfully says nothing and informs her she has one more job to handle today. Just then, it is revealed that Minako is wearing a cursed necklace. That night, as Setsu and Levia slept peacefully, Shironeko waited in front of the inn. Kuroinu comes out and informs her that the duo have fallen asleep. She asked her if she was still hesitant to kill, but Shironeko said no, saying that her mind was made up. She asks Kurionu if she could call her sister, and adds that Kurionu is the only reason she and Minako were able to survive. She pleads with her to be their big sister and let them live with her as a family after she completes the assignment. Kuroinu agrees and tells her to get the job done, so Minako will not be sad, and Shironeko agrees delightfully. Kuroinu hands her the keys, and she goes inside as Kuroinu thinks about what they talked about. Shironeko opens the door and finds the duo sleeping. She uses her claws to slash them, but they vanish, as Levia had used illusion magic to make it happen. Setsu shows up behind her and kicks her. She jumps out through the window as he follows her. He asks her if she is one of Toma's minions, and she tells him she doesn't know who that is, but she has to take his life. She goes into partial beast transformation, and she charges Setsu and blasts him, but he is no match for her. Setsu grabs her by the head and slaps her so hard that she falls to the ground and faints. She turns a bit purple, and Setsu thinks she must have brought the curse from someplace else. Kuroinu watches everything and runs away when her plan gets thwarted. After Shironeko comes, she tries to attack Setsu, but Minik stops her and tells her that they found her on the road and passed out, so they brought her home. Setsu winks at Shironeko, gesturing that her secret is safe. She plays along and thanks him for helping her. He tells her he understands her situation, and then says that Minako isn't sick. He uses magic and shows them the power of the cursed necklace. Shironeko begs him in tears to save Minako, and he promises to save her. Setsu tells Minako that the process may be painful. As she lays down, he summons a shark-like sword, Glutton. He uses the sword to absorb the curse from Minako. She shakes in pain as her sister cheers for her to hang in there. As they continue to remove the curse, they are interrupted by Kuroinu, who tries to stop them by throwing a spear towards Setsu, but Shironeko jumps in, and it hits her on the shoulder. She reprimands her for not being able to finish the job. Setsu wants to handle Kuroinu, but he can't stop the absorption halfway. Kuroinu threatens him, saying she will be taking him to her master today. She tries to attack him, but Levia blasts her off. Setsu asks Levia if she can handle it alone, and she says yes. They fight each other, but Kuroinu soon realizes that Levia is a sea god and wonders why she is helping a human. Kuroinu thinks Levia will not be as powerful as she is in the sea now that she is on land, but she gets the shock of her life. She splits herself into multiples and tries to attack, but Levia summons seawater, and it pierces all the clones, including the real Kuroinu. The mirage fades as she falls to the ground, shocked to see seawater beneath her. Levia tells her that the sea is wherever she is. She blasts her off one more time, and Kuroinu falls to the ground. Levia asks her what Toma is after, and promises not to take her life if she tells the truth. Shironeko interrupts them, and asks Kuroinu why she did this to her. Kuroinu tells her not to call her big S-eyes, as she finds it revolting. She reprimands her for being unable to carry out such a simple order. Levia goes in to finish her, but Kuroinu starts to tell her Toma's plan. She said Toma is trying to become a god and destroy the world. Levia says, "How dare a lowly human try to be a god?" Just then, Kuroinu breaks a small ball, and a white light erupts as she vanishes. Setsu finishes and joins them outside, as Minako runs out and hugs her sister as they sob in each other's hands. Setsu and Levia talk about Toma's plan to be a god, and Setsu calls him a total whack job. The duo agrees that they need to stop him since he wants to destroy the world. They stand there for a while as the sun rises. Later that day, the duo continues their journey, this time with a boat. Levia yawns and dozes as she hasn't had the chance to rest. She told Setsu that she had hoped they could sleep last night, but it ended up being a big mess. They continue talking about their journey to meet the Beast King before they suddenly see Shironeko and Mineko waiting for them by the riverside. Shironeko asks the duo to let them join the fight, and Mineko tells them they will both be useful in combat. Shironeko adds that if they're going to Regdom, the royal capital, they need to take a beastman with them, and she also needs to repay them for saving her sister. She tells them that she also wants to see big sister, Kuroinu, again, and talk to her. Setsu looks at Levia, and they both nod to themselves. Setsu then tells the girls that the fight will be tough and asks them if they are sure, and they both agree, so he tells them to hop on, and the boat leaves. The story begins in the past with Setsu training a young beastman, Roa Leonair, the Beast King's daughter. Setsu taunts her, asking if that is the best she can do, and Roa angrily tells him she doesn't want to be his student. They continue to argue with each other, and Setsu tells her to attack him. Roa shakes under the sword. She is a little too small for it, and they charge towards each other. In the present, at Regdom, the royal capital, the officials argue with each other about the war. Some think they should attack the other kingdoms, while others think they shouldn't get involved. Regulus, the king, sits down calmly as he listens to them fight, then feels something and gestures to Roa to check it out. Outside the castle, Setsu tries to convince the guards to let him in, but they refuse. Shironeko and Mineko also try to convince them, but it doesn't work. Setsu shouts in frustration and says he might just leap in for the last time. Just then, they notice Roa falling from the top of the gate, delightful as she screams Setsu's name. She lands, causing a large explosion that sends the guards falling. As she lands on them very calmly, she starts talking to him sweetly, and he tells her that she hasn't changed and calls her the Beast King's daughter, leaving Shironeko and her sister in shock. Roa hugs Setsu but tries to sneak an attack on him. He flips her and pins her to the ground as they continue to talk and argue with each other about him being her master. The other two girls are still stunned and can't believe she's the princess, as Levia assures them they are not dreaming. Roa locks arms with Setsu as they enter the castle. She asks him why he disappeared, and he apologizes, telling her that it is a long story. He continues to rub her jaw sweetly, and Roa enjoys it, but Mineko, feeling embarrassed, asks them to stop the public display of affection. Shironeko looks at them and says she is jealous. Levia just heaves a sigh. Suddenly, the castle door flies open, and an excited Regulus jumps out, lunging towards Setsu with his fist. Setsu catches him by the wrist and flips him to the floor. Regulus laughs heartily and commends him. Shironeko, Mineko, and Levia look at them surprised. It turns out the beastmen love dueling, and this is considered a greeting for them. Setsu looks inside the castle and sees all the officials passed out on the floor, and he tells Regulus that he hasn't changed. Regulus points out that although he looks different, his smell is still the same. He announces that they must hold a feast to welcome him, but says that before then they need to fight a duel. Setsu turns him down politely and says he has urgent business to discuss. Setsu informs him that Toma is alive and is behind the war. Regulus decides that he will join the fight, but Setsu turns him down and tells him he needs to stay back in case Toma tries to start something in Zu Dorado, the Beastman continent. Roa offers to go instead of her father, and Regulus agrees she is the best replacement. Just then, a voice interrupts them as a young man walks in, saying they are at war and can't spare any manpower for other nations. He introduces himself as Ruga, commander of the Zu Dorado army, and Roa's fiancé. Regulus says he has a point, but Setsu is the hero. Ruga says Setsu has been missing for 5 years, and they are not sure he is still on their side. Roa cuts in and tells him that she trusts Setsu, but Ruga tells her that he cannot give her up to him. Ruga challenges Setsu to a duel. Regulus agrees and decrees that the winner will be betrothed to Roa, surprising everyone. Setsu tries to explain that they don't need to put Roa's marriage on the line, but Ruga cuts in and tells him he will be waiting at the arena at noon tomorrow. He walks out as the Beastmen present cheer him on. Later on, Regulus apologizes for the turn of events. Regulus says once he wins, he will get military support and Roa. Roa holds Setsu and tells him he needs to win. Setsu agrees, and they continue to discuss. That night, Roa goes to see Ruga, as she tries to change his mind and tells him Setsu is too powerful for him to fight. Ruga arrogantly tells her that he will not back down. He tells her he has a chance of winning and shows her rune tattooed on his arm. saying a mage gave it to him. He says the magic rune converts strong will to strength. He continues to tell her that he is ready to lose his life to protect her, and as his eyes are filled with a strong desire, the rune lights up, startling Roa. Roa leaves him disappointed as he looks up at the moon and says he never looks at her. That's the reason she never fell for him. The next morning, everyone gathers at the arena at Regdom Royal Capital to watch the duel. The beastmen cheer Ruga on, and Shironeko and Minako cheer Seitsu. Levia continues to spend too much on different snacks, uninterested in the whole thing. Setsu is surprised by the giant crowd, and Roa tells him that beastmen love festival. She cheers him on, and they continue to talk as Ruga angrily stares at them from afar. Regulus announces that the battle ends when one fighter can no longer fight or surrenders. He signals for them to begin, and the crowd goes wild. The duo begins to fight, but Ruga is no match for Setsu. Setsu taunts him, and Ruga goes into full transformation. He turns into a large wolf-like creature, and the crow goes wild. Roa tells Setsu to be careful, but before she finishes talking, Setsu already deals him a good blow and sends him falling with a huge thud, shocking the crowd. Roa cheers him on, and Setsu tells Regulus they need to stop the fight, but Ruga rises back up and wants to go again. Setsu tells him it's a bad idea to continue, but he refuses. Shironeko and Minako feel chills running down their spines as they agree that something isn't right with Ruga. Voices begin to whisper in Ruga's head, brainwashing him. He remembers the past when he saw Setsu teaching Roa, and gets filled with rage that explodes as the rune on his arm turns out to be Toma's curse. He attacks Setsu, blasting him, and Regulus commands the audience to evacuate. Levia throws him his sword, and Setsu cuts Ruga's arm with it, but to his surprise, it grows back. Roa runs towards Ruga, trying to calm him down, but Setsu stops her and says the curse is too powerful and can infect her. Roa offers to finish him off herself, but Setsu says he doesn't want Ruga killed. He tells her he has a plan, but he may be exposed while doing it, so Roa tells him she'll cover him. He raises his hands and is about to summon the shark sword, Glutton, when suddenly dark fog falls on the arena. Toma blasts Ruga's head, killing him, and appears as an illusion from his headspace. He greets Setsu and says he killed Ruga, so that Setsu wouldn't waste his precious magic. Roa cuts in angrily as she asks if Toma tricked Ruga into doing this. Setsu tells her not to go closer. He says even as an illusion, Toma's magic is very powerful, but Toma gets very angry with her for interrupting him and tries to hurt her, but Setsu points his sword at him, telling him to stop. He shakes with laughter, saying that Setsu is choosing someone other than him again. He tells Setsu that he will kill every species in the world and that both of them can live quietly as gods. Setsu calls him an idiot and tells him that if he hurts anyone, he will hunt him and put him down again. Toma tells him that Destinia has already begun invading the demonic continent and asks him if he can save everyone at once, taunting him. Toma bids him farewell as the illusion vanishes and Ruga's body drops to the ground. Later on, Regulus apologizes and says he shouldn't have allowed the fight. Setsu tells him that this is not a time to sulk. He says they will head to the demonic continent and try to stop the war. Regulus tells him he will prepare a ship for them and his army will join them there soon. Setsu bumps fists with him and says he is counting on him. He turns, and the girls gesture to him that they're ready. Roa is still at the arena, looking at where Ruga died. Setsu asks her if she is fine, and she tells him yes. She says they can get sentimental later, as she leaves the arena and looks back one more time, telling Ruga to watch her. The scene opens 10 years ago, the first time Setsu was summoned to Eclair. Two young boys, Setsu and Toma, suddenly appear in the castle of Destinia. The boys look confused. The officials are overjoyed that the summoning spell worked. The king welcomes the boys and says they are heroes sent from another world to help Destinia win the war. Setsu angrily calls them idiots and says he never agreed to this. He tells them not to dump their problems on him and Toma. His attitude shocks everyone. The king asks for his name, and he introduces himself as Setsu, and Toma looks at him in admiration. One day on the practice grounds, Toma asked him why he remained so calm after dropping into this world out of the blue. Setsu tells him that this world has demons and monsters, so they have to get stronger. Toma tells him he is afraid of going to war. Setsu tries to calm him down, but Toma is still afraid. Setsu offers him his hands and says they need to do their best to survive since they are in the same boat. He says if they stay alive, things will work out, and Toma grabs his hands delightfully. As they head inside, Setsu tells Toma that they need to stop the war. He says killing or getting killed by strangers in an unknown land is wrong. Toma is shocked and tells him it's impossible, and besides that, he is not as strong as Setsu. Setsu reassures him that they can do anything, He says that they are each other's allies since they came from the same place. He tells him they are brothers, so he will protect Toma no matter what. Setsu and Toma make a promise to each other. One day, Setsu decides to leave and try to stop the war. Toma tells him he is still too scared to leave, and he promises Setsu that he will get stronger and join him soon. They both promise to meet again once they become true heroes. That night, he sets out with Glein, Elka, and Thea, as Toma watches them leave. A few years later, Toma is awarded for his accomplishments in battle, and this makes him a knight and names him Silver Hero. After the ceremony, his comrades praised his achievements. He looks up, remembering Setsu, and says he is one step closer to their promise. He says he'll get stronger so he can stop the war. He tells the soldiers and his trusted advisor that he will forge on to fulfill his dream, and asks them if they are willing to die for him. They tell him yes and head back into battle. During the battle, they break into a demon temple, and the soldiers try to run as they see Toma advancing, calling him the Silver Devil. Toma kills them all effortlessly. He goes deep inside the temple and finds two men who surrender and beg him to spare their lives, but Toma beheads them anyway. His advisor tells him the temple has been cleared, and he tells him to prepare as they will head out soon. As Toma tries to leave, a voice stops him, and he turns to see an ominous pendant glowing. The voice beckons to him and tries to draw him in. It tells him that it can fulfill his deepest desire, and Toma stops to think about Setsu. The pendant emits dark magic, which poisons his mind as he keeps thinking about his deepest desire, to be with Setsu. It finally gets to him, and he grabs the pendant. Toma's comrades and his advisor are killed in the war, making him behave even more erratic as he keeps saying he needs to keep fighting. A messenger interrupts him and tells him that he brought an urgent message from the capital. He says a truce has been called, and they have been ordered to retreat. He tells him that a delegation of leaders who will sign the treaty will be passing this way, and they have been ordered to escort them safely. Suddenly a carriage passes by, and Toma feels Setsu's magic. After it passes, he sees Setsu with Regulus, Desas, Levia, Glein, Elka, Thea, Alize, and Roa discussing and laughing happily with each other, making him jealous. The next day, the leaders sign the peace treaty and unveil the monument to represent the truce, and everyone is ecstatic as they cheer, chanting Setsu's name. Toma watches as Setsu continues to laugh with his newfound friends. That night, the whole of Destinia celebrates as they throw festivities all over the kingdom. As Setsu watches from the castle walls, Toma joins him and tells him he is amazing for ending the war. Setsu says he didn't do anything special and just traveled around. Toma says he could never do something as big as stopping a war, but Setsu tells him he is a very important person now and commends him for his award. Toma continues talking, but Elka interrupts him as she beckons Setsu from below to join them for a party in his honor. Setsu tells Toma he has to go and tells him he is glad that he is doing fine. As he leaves, Toma stops him, but he stammers a bit before asking what he thinks about going back to their world now that the war is over. He pulls his sword with the pendant attached to it and tells him that he found a way to go back. Setsu laughs and tells him he doesn't plan to go back, and now that the war is over, he wants to travel and see this other world. Toma is shocked and not happy with this, as the voice in the pendant continues to poison and brainwash him. Setsu wishes him luck with his journey back home and leaves. Toma loses it as he cries in despair, and the cursed magic from the pendant takes over him. Toma calls out to Setsu and tells him he will destroy everything that gets in between them. He says once he kills all the humans, demons, and beastmen, then Setsu will go back to the way he was when they arrived. He tells him that he has to pay attention to him and only him. He promises that he will kill anyone who tries to take Setsu away from him and tries to attack him. Setsu summons the shark sword, Glutton, and blocks his attack. Toma continues to attack him as he laughs maniacally. Glein, Thea, and Elka look up and see Setsu fighting and race up to meet him. Toma sees them and says they must be the ones that seduced Setsu. The duo charges toward each other as their sword meets, and Toma slashes Setsu, injuring him. Setsu jumps and forces his sword into Toma's shoulder, and a giant explosion erupts and the duo vanishes. By the time Elka and the others reach the top of the tower, Setsu had disappeared. It is revealed that Toma disappeared into the temple, where he first found the pendant. He takes it out of his sword, saying none of his desires came true as he throws it to the ground, as he says he is tired. Suddenly, the pendant starts to emit a bright light and shows Toma a vision. In the vision, he sees a lab underground, and masked men are leading a chained prisoner to a table to experiment on him. They injected him with a red liquid as he screamed in pain. Inside another room, a man is chained and shocked with electricity. As the masked people observe and take notes, they were experimenting on people with magic powers, a young demon. Melillar cries and begs them to stop the experiments. Kuroinu is also seen here too. The vision ends, and Toma happily finds his will again, as he says that they were others like him. He picks up the pendant and decides to save them. That night, an explosion rocked the lab, and it collapsed. As the prisoners rise from the rubble, they see Toma. He tells them they are now free, and asks them to join him and destroy the world. He tells them they are the same as him, rejected by the world, and they join him. Back in the present, the Destinian army sails for the demonic continent. One of the soldiers informs their general that they will be docking soon. The general addresses his soldiers and tells them to prepare to fight and defend their kingdom, and they cheer after he finishes. The students from the other world look on in fear. Thea controls a magic compass and says she senses a trace of Toma's power. She tells them that Toma is definitely somewhere on the demonic continent. Blaine says they can't tell the general because he wouldn't believe them and would only call them spies. He asks if anyone has heard from Setsu, and Yuhi tells him not to worry. She says Setsu must be doing his best to stop the war, as she thinks about the moment she saw him before he left. Elka tells them they need to buy more time until Setsu arrives. Thea tells Yuhi they need to limit the number of casualties, and tells her to believe in herself. The four of them join their weapons together and pledge to win back peace. The Destinian ships land, and the soldiers charge forward as the demonic army tries to defend against them. Blaine goes in with the students from the other world and tells them they will attack from the back. The two nations continue to fight with magic and ground soldiers. The demonic army tries to stop the Destinian army from setting foot in their camp, but the magicians destroy the wooden barriers they built as the Destinian army march forward into the kingdom. At the back, Thea tells the students not to go after injured soldiers, and Elka tells them to wait for the soldiers to be distracted as she charges in with Thea and Glein. The students stand around looking terrified and confused, but one of them says they just need to get the enemy before the enemy gets them, so they charge in, leaving one of the girls behind. A demon soldier tries to attack the girl, but Yuhi saves her. She thanks Yuhi and tells her she is so scared, and Yuhi reassures her and tells her not to be afraid. The demon soldiers start to retreat and run back. Just then, Yuhi sees one of the students trying to kill a wounded soldier, and she stops him. She says the soldier can't move anymore, but he tells her they are at war, and it is kill or be killed. Yuhi is not having any of it, as she continues to reprimand him. Suddenly, a voice cuts in, laughing and taunting them. Then magic runes appear in the sky, and the same giant monster soldiers that attacked them the first day they came to Eclair drop from inside it. Just then, Alize, now under a curse, also appears and starts killing the human soldiers. The demon soldiers are happy, thinking they are reinforcements for them, but the giant iron soldiers start to attack the demonic army. Glein freezes two of them and cuts them in half. Elka and Glein notice that the giant suit contains humans. The trio are shocked as they notice the demon that was killing on a rampage earlier was Alize. Melular walks up to them, humming and smiling. They ask what she did to Alize, and Melular says she turned her into a doll. She continues to taunt them and asks the trio to be her puppets. Elka charges to attack her, but Alize steps in. Elka calls out to her, but she doesn't come back to herself. Melular cuts her own wrists and splashes her blood on the ground. The blood starts to reshape as she introduces herself to them as the Monster Master. Her blood merges and forms 4 different giant monsters. The monsters attack the trio, but Elka kills the snake monster immediately with ice magic. Glein slashes the giant gorilla monster and kills it swiftly. A giant iron soldier tries to attack Glein, but Thea steps in and uses her magic stick to blast it off, killing it along with the dragon monster created by Melular. Glein thanks her as she says 3 down. Elka tells them she'll take Melular down, and she asks them to finish the remaining monsters. Suddenly they hear a thud and turn around to see that Yuhi already handled the last monster formed with Melular's blood. They ask Melular what is next now that her monsters are gone. She is angry and wonders how they're so strong without any modifications or drugs. She angrily tells Alize to kill them. Glein attacks Alize and apologizes as he slashes her. Melular sees she has been cornered, so she pulls out a sword, but Elka hits it out of her hand and stabs her. Melular falls, coughing a lot of blood, and Elka tells her that is the price she will pay for toying with people's lives as she walks away from her. Melular mumbles under her breath that she can't die like this as she rises. Elka is shocked and wonders how she is alive when her magic organ was already pierced, and Melular, with a smug smile, says she has been modified and tells them all her organs are doubled. She told them she was a freak created by an experiment as a weapon. She says Toma saved her, so to destroy this world, she must fight for Toma. She casts limit break magic and raises a gigantic 3-headed monster, Chimera, and calls it the perfect marionette doll. Mellular goes to the head of the monster and uses magic to merge herself with the monster to control it. Thea tells them Mellular is fueling the magic with her life force. She raises the monsters and attacks them. The four of them are no match for the chimera. It breathes fire toward them. But Thea and Yuhi use their wands to build a magic barrier, but it drains them, especially Thea, as the chimera is too powerful. Suddenly, a butterfly flies past Alizi. Mellular continues to taunt them, and as the chimera prepares for another magic fire attack, Thea falls, as she is already exhausted. As Elka and Glein lose hope, the butterfly flies past them and goes straight for Mellular. She turns to look at it for a second and then tries to continue the attack, but a sword pierces her from the back, and she turns to see Alize. Alize calls her Amela and hugs her as tears drop from her eyes. She remembers the time she spent in Zathro with Amel. The chimera turns to stone as Mellular dies. They perform healing magic on Alize, and Glein says the magic is working and informs them that she'll be fine. Yuhi helps Thea up. Thea tells her she wasn't expecting Mellular to be so strong, and she says they all need to rest. Suddenly, an explosion erupts as another one of Toma's minions shows up. Glein, Thea, and Elka are worried he is too strong, and they're too worn out to fight. So Yuhi tells them she'll handle this fight. They try to dissuade her, but she tells them to believe in her. Glein agrees and says Yuhi is in better shape than them, so they should let her handle it. Thea agrees and says they'll back her up. Elka tells her not to give up. She is about to fight the demon, but suddenly they all stop as they feel Setsu's magic approaching and sigh in relief. Setsu jumps out of the sky and lands in front of his friends. He commends Yuhi and tells them they're safe now, as Yuhi looks at him with so much happiness in her eyes. Back at Regdom, an officer informs Regulus that they are ready to send the forces to the demonic continent. He tells them to send aid immediately. One of the chiefs asks the king what would happen to Eclair now, and the king says they need to trust Setsu. He tells them that Setsu is already on his way there. Back on the demonic continent, after Setsu lands, Elka and Yuhi are ecstatic. Yuhi jumps on him, and they fall to the ground. He tells her to calm down, and Yuhi pulls away from him, livid as she realizes what she did. She apologizes to him for getting carried away. Yuhi starts rambling about her training with Elka, and then goes down on all fours, telling Setsu to sit on her back, just like Elka taught her. He flicks her forehead and tells her to stand up. Setsu tells her to stand aside with Elka and the others. She warns him to be careful and goes to join them. The man pulls his cape, and Setsu realizes he is the same person he fought at the wedding in Dezas's castle. He tells Setsu he has been looking forward to their fight. Setsu turns to ensure the others are safe, as Yuhi puts up a barrier to protect them. The man asked him why he cares so much for the weak. Setsu tells him they're precious to him, so he protects them. He tells Setsu that the world needs to be destroyed, and Setsu says he'll protect it as they charge towards each other. On another side of the battle, Kuroinu continues to attack the soldiers, but Shironeko and Mineko jump in to handle her. Shironeko tries to talk sense into her, but she laughs her off. Kuroinu taunts them and the sister bond they share, calling them useless little cats with no power. They fight her, but they're both no match for Kuroinu. She cuts both of them, and Shironeko kicks her off balance while Mineko lands on top of her with her knees to finish her. Kuroinu falls, and they both think it is over, but she undergoes partial beast transformation as she captures Mineko with tentacles and attacks Shironeko. Kuroinu then performs limit break magic, and she gets multiple giant arms. She goes in fast to finish the sisters as taunts and laughs at them, but Shironeko gets up and joins hands with her sister as they perform the beast merge, and they merge to become one. Kuroinu continues to make fun of them, but she is no match for the merged beast. She lunges at them with her multiple arms to attack them, but they summon the wind beast magic, cutting her beast arms. Kuroinu falls but doesn't give up, as she remembers her dead sisters and goes in for one last fight, but they kill her swiftly as she drops dead to the ground, and the girls separate from each other. At another battle site, soldiers attack one of Toma's minions, a man made of iron, Virdos, but their swords are no match for him. Roa shows up and kicks him so hard that he falls back. The soldiers notice that she is the Beast King's daughter, and she tells them she is their reinforcement. They thank her and leave. Virdos taunts Roa, and she is surprised to find out his body is made up of iron, as she calls him a freak. Virdos tells her that humans created him and experimented on him since he was young, and said Toma rescued him. Roa tells him angrily that Toma is just trying to destroy the world based on his delusion. Virdos tells her he doesn't care. He starts talking about Ruga, making Roa very enraged as she attacks him, but injures one of her knees in the process. Roa tries to attack him again, but he turns into tiny iron particles and tells her his real power is the ability to control his body freely, and his full body vanishes. Then he gathers the particles into balls and attacks Roa, wounding her badly. He forms back his body and taunts Roa, thinking she is dead. As he turns to leave, Roa gets back up and musters her full power, leaving him in shock. She charges towards him, covered in fire, and he tries the balls again, but she runs right through them. The power Roa summoned is only used by the bloodline of the Beast King. Moments before their death, they burn their lives to take an enemy down with them. Roa rams him into the ground and punches him ferociously non-stop. He laughs and forms spikes from his body, which impales Roa in multiple places, but she doesn't back down. To his utter shock, she breaks every single spike and deals him a fatal blow. When she is done, the power fades as she falls to the ground, fatally wounded. Virdos walks up to her and uses his last strength to heal her. To Roa's surprise, he falls to the ground and says he admires her pride and feels she should live on. Roa wondered what a good person like him was doing with someone like Toma and promised him that she would carry his pride with her. Back to Setsu's fight, the man realizes that Setsu is no match for him as he fends off his attacks easily. The man uses magic and tries to freeze him, but when he thinks it is successful, he goes into attack, but Setsu frees himself to the man's shock. Setsu tells him not to underestimate him next time. He tells him to give up and call Toma, but the man laughs wickedly as he summons limit break magic. The magic gives him an invincible amour, Skia, Amour. He tells Setsu that he is willing to sacrifice his life just to defeat him, and goes in to attack him. Setsu hits him with his sword, but it is useless because of the Skia Amour. The man tells him that the shadow armor absorbs all energy. Setsu is stunned, and the man punches him in the face and looks pleased with himself. Setsu tells him he'll just have to slash through that armor, and he gets charged with red fury energy and summons the flying sword, Zetsu. The sword breaks the armor in one blow. Setsu tells him to give up or he might die, but he tells him that death isn't a problem for him. He says he has no purpose for living if he is defeated. He said Setsu lives in the light, so he will never understand. He charges for Setsu again, but Setsu cuts him swiftly with his sword. In his final moment, he thanked Setsu for letting him fight, without holding back as he dropped to the ground. Toma notices that all his minions have lost. He thinks that Setsu stands in his way once again. He says this is the finale, and it is time to destroy the world. Setsu looks up and sees Toma's powers rising from a mountain as Toma finally reveals himself. Back at the Demon Lord's castle, Lavia barges in, looking for Desus. Desus tells her that she is fine. She says she noticed that some strong magic forces have vanished from the battlefield. Desus is pleased that the tide of the battle is turning in their favor. Levia says it is good that Setsu made it in time. Suddenly, they are interrupted by Toma. He tells them the end is here as he draws his sword to attack, and he says he'll teach them what despair feels like. Toma defeats the duo swiftly. Setsu races into the castle, looking for both of them. He sees them tied to a corner, battered, with Toma standing over them. Toma tells him that he knew he would show up, but he is still jealous that he did. He continues to talk, but Setsu attacks him angrily. Setsu says there is no need to talk sense into him anymore, and Toma tells him they can talk after he destroys the world. Setsu charges towards him, and they clash with the full force of their powers. Toma turns his sword into an explosive using magic and flings it towards Setsu, but he hits it back and it blows off a part of the castle and opens a crack in the sky. Desus puts up a magic barrier to protect herself and Levia, and the duo notices the crack in the sky as they agree that those two are very powerful. Setsu tells Toma that they should fight for real if he is done warming up. Toma sends in more explosion magic in large numbers as Setsu tries to dodge them. He uses the flying sword magic to blast them all at once, but he leaves his back wide open as Toma sneaks an attack from the back. Toma sends the flying sword, but Setsu swiftly counters it with his sword as an explosion ruptures and blood trickles from his arm. Toma tells him that he has lost his touch. He charges toward him, but Setsu hits his sword out of his hands and flings it away. To his surprise, Setsu drops his sword, but it distracts Toma as a massive blow lands on his face. Setsu hits him with his fist continuously. He goes in for a finishing blow, but Toma counters his fist with a magic explosion. Toma looks a bit beaten down, and Setsu tells him he likes the look on his face. He tells Setsu that he forgot he was a tricky fighter. He says there is no need to drag the fight, as he summons his cursed sword and uses form change magic to turn the sword into a giant gun, leaving Setsu stunned. He points the gun and shoots an explosion, which blasts a hole in a mountain near the castle. Setsu thinks of a way to take the gun away from him. He charges towards him with a kick as Toma turns the gun in his direction, but a little too late, and Setsu kicks him into the sky. They continue their battle there as Toma shoots at him non-stop, but he keeps dogging swiftly. Toma changes the form of the gun into a machine gun that shoots multiple rounds at once. He resumes shooting, but Setsu dodges and uses a magic barrier to protect himself. Setsu summons his shark sword, Glutton, and uses it to devour the bullets, leaving Toma in shock. With his 2 physical swords, Setsu uses all his might and summons 2 flying swords. Toma is dumbfounded as the 2 swords fly towards him, and they explode in his face. Toma angrily tells Setsu that his sword is really a problem. The rest of the team joins Dazas and Lavia in the castle as they look up. Setsu sees them and says he is happy they are safe. He then tells Toma to give since all his friends are gone. Toma is enraged as he remembers all the times he saw Setsu happy with other people. He glows red with rage as he says Setsu always leaves him alone. He emits a very dark and powerful magic, and Setsu thinks it must be coming from somewhere else, but he realizes it is from the pendant attached to his sword. Toma laughs maniacally, and his power grows even more, as the team in the castle wonders what type of magic it is. As the light from the magic settled, Setsu saw 2 gigantic guns by Toma's sides and realized that he had just summoned Limit Break. Blood trickled from Toma's eyes, signaling that he truly used Limit Break. He tells Setsu that it is time for them to end the fight. Their fight continues to rage in the sky. Toma taunts him, laughs like a maniac, and fires his large gun erratically in the sky. Setsu tries to get close but can't, with bullets raining everywhere. Elka wonders how anyone is going to fight in that condition, and Glein says the gun may not even run out of bullets. Toma turns the gun to the castle and fires it. Setsu opens Glutton and tries to absorb the bullets, but he misses a few of them, and they land inside the castle. As the dust settles, he sees that they protected themselves by raising a barrier together. Toma sees them and gets very angry. Setsu says it is now his turn and sends a flying sword, but Toma uses his gun as a shield and blocks it. Setsu sneaks up on him and sends flying swords, firing them in rapid succession, breaks Toma's giant gun, leaving him open. Setsu angrily goes in for the final blow, slashes him, and wounds him fatally. As Toma falls from the sky, he remembers his life before the war and the promises he made with Setsu. He then remembers how Setsu left him for his new friends and screams that the power from the pendant fills him up as he recovers, and this time, he comes back with a giant rocket-looking gun, leaving Setsu in utter shock. Setsu quickly puts up a magic barrier as Toma fires the gun, but it is too powerful for him. It breaks Setsu's barrier and hits him. He falls and tries to get up, but he can't. Toma flies down and looks at his state, laughing and looking very pleased. He can't believe he beat Setsu and starts rambling about how he won and laughing maniacally. To his shock, Setsu rises from the rubble and tells him that no matter how strong he gets, he'll never be able to beat him. Setsu locks him in a shining circle, using dimensional magic, and he pushes the shark sword into the earth, summoning the Earth Eater. The ground around Toma starts to form an enclosure. Toma tries to summon Limit Break again, but it can only be used once. He sees his end, as he is livid with fear, and screams that he doesn't want to die. As the prison starts to close, he frantically begs Setsu to forgive him, but Setsu just looks on as the prison closes. Toma finally realizes that all he ever wanted was to be by Setsu's side as he vanishes. Setsu is seen sitting down across from Toma's body as he waits for him to wake up. Toma wakes up surprised that he is not dead. Setsu tells him that he never wanted him dead. He just wanted him to come back to his senses. He explains that the sword only ati the curse that was cast on him. He adds that, besides, he promised to protect him. Toma breaks into tears, saying he did unforgivable things, so why save him? Setsu says he saved him so that he could atone for his sins, no matter how long it took. His friends arrive, screaming his name as they rush to hug him. After things settle down, Setsu goes to see Toma in prison and tells him that they have decided on a punishment for him. He tells him that the punishment is to use his magic and cast a transfer spell to send the foreign heroes back to Earth. Toma is surprised, as that is not what he was expecting. Dazas tells him that without his magic power, he will be an ordinary human, so there will be no need to worry about him doing something bad. Regulus jokingly adds that his face doesn't look like he intends to do anything bad. Setsu asks Toma to join the students and go back to Earth for a fresh start. Dazas tells him to thank Setsu for negotiating on his behalf. Toma agrees as he realizes Setsu always keeps his promise. The following day, everyone gathers around for the transfer magic as Toma casts the spell. The students cheer happily as they can finally go back home. Setsu bids them farewell as they vanish. Toma decided not to leave. He discusses this with Setsu and tells him he is going on a trip. He wants to see the world and decide how to atone for his sins. Setsu tells him he will be rooting for him. They bid each other farewell as Toma leaves. Later on, Setsu also leaves Dystinia. He bids his friends farewell as Elka begs in tears that she wants to join him. Thea and Glein tell her there is too much post-war work to be done, as she screams that she doesn't want to be a knight anymore. Yuhi didn't go back to Earth and joined him on his trip to see the world. They stop by the seaside to greet Levia. Setsu asks about the safety of the sea, and she tells him that they are safe as long as she is around. She continues to talk, but just then, a giant octopus appears on the sea. Setsu and Yuhi watch with smiles as she tackles the monster. Alize is seen recovering from her wounds. Setsu and Yuhi stop to visit Deizas and commend how well things are going post-war in her nation. Deizas tells him that Ri is also doing well at her shop. As they see Ruri selling squid rings, they go to visit Regulus, and once again, Setsu fights at the gate for entrance, telling them he knows Regulus. Roa, Shironeko, and Mineko jump from the gate and land on him. The two sisters now live with Roa. Roa shows off her attire to Setsu, as she was made commander of the army. Shironeko was made deputy commander, and Mineko was made second deputy. Roa tells him that they are pricing hard and have challenges to beat him one day. Setsu is happy that the Beastman nation is also doing well. Setsu and Yuhi continue on their journey, and Setsu tells her, "There are so many cool things to see in this world.